Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Cindy Walsh with the League of Women Voters and the advocacy group and part of the Voting Rights Committee. And I also act as a volunteer lobbyist. Welcome. Today, we're going to talk about how the legislative process works. And let's go to the next slide. Thank you. The presenters today are Mike Hans, who's part of the Arizona Senate Democratic Caucus, and Elizabeth Higgins, also from the Senate Arizona Democratic Caucus. Joining me too is Amra Muslim, and she's going to be co-facilitator today. I'd like to welcome everybody, and we're going to talk about some tips for the meeting. I am the moderator, and I'm going to introduce the presenters. We're going to have a Q&A, and we'll have a few closing remarks. Some tips for today are, please post your questions in the Q&A tool available on your webinar toolbar. The moderator, I'll pose the questions to the speakers during the sessions. Attendees will see answered questions only. If there are any unanswered questions, the League advocacy team will do its best to follow up with the speakers and share responses with everyone who registered for this event. For additional questions, please contact us at LWVAZ@gmail.com. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. As you know, the League is celebrating 106 years of a service this year, and we are a nonpartisan, political activist grassroots organization that believes voters should play a critical role in our democracy. We neither support nor oppose any party or candidate, but we do advocate on issues that are aligned with our public policy positions. We have over 800 state and local leagues across the U.S., including in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and Virgin Islands, and used to be in Hong Kong, but are no longer there because of their political situation. These local and state groups work on grassroots initiatives to empower voters and defend democracy. It is our mission for empowering voters defending democracy. We envision democracy where every person has a desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. Joining us today is Mike Hans. Mike is a native Arizonan, and this is his 12th legislative session and 4th with the Democratic staff. He currently staffs the Arizona Senate's Government, Judiciary, and Elections and Federalism committees. He previously worked as the legislative research analyst for the Senate Committee on Government for 4 years. He's worked as a legislative research analyst in the Arizona House in committees on government, local and international affairs, children's and family affairs, and transportation for 3 years. He graduated from U of A with a BA in political science. Also joining us is Elizabeth Higgins. Elizabeth also was a native Arizonan. Started out her career working for Harry Mitchell, both as a state senator and when he was in the U.S. House of Representatives. I was in his district at that time. After a short time in private practice, Elizabeth went to work for the city of Tempe as the chief of staff for the mayor, and then as an assistant city attorney. In January of 2023, she was hired as the general counsel for the Arizona Senate Democratic Caucus, and she is currently advises the caucus and acts as a senior policy advisor. She graduated from ASU with an undergraduate degree in political science and psychology, and graduated from the Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law. I welcome you both. Just as kind of a grounding point for us, what we need to know for maximum impact is what we can do. This is about how the League and us as individuals can raise our voice and stop the legislation in its tracks, change the language of the legislation, and advance and promote good legislation. And we really are focusing on emphasizing to our legislators as we communicate with them what good legislation looks like, as opposed to some of the things we see that we consider as bad legislation. We want to understand the Arizona legislature, the composition, how bills become laws, the types of legislation that comes through, and where we can find information and when to act. We want to be able to use every tool available. We talk about RTS frequently and the request to speak, and it's a unique system. Not every state has a system like RTS. That we want to talk about emails and letters to committee members, letters to the legislature and the governor, phone calls, op-eds, letters to the editor, and anything that we can have out there that helps support and educate our members and our community. Next slide. Thank you. This is a great flow chart that talks about how legislation becomes law. So when a bill is introduced, it's introduced in the first chamber. It is then, well, not all of them, even though it's introduced, it may not get referred to committee. It is when they are referred to committee, and it's on the agenda and heard by the committee, then RTS opens. And at that point, you probably have gotten an email from the call to action from the advocacy group to say to RTS on the things that we oppose. And then at the hearing, the RTS closes. So it's open as soon as it appears on the agenda, the bill appears on the agenda, and then the RTS is open. If it passes committee, it goes to the floor calendar where it's heard by the committee of the whole. And if it is voted in favor during crossover week, which is this week, the legislature is in crossover, bills that are initiated in the Senate transfer to the House, and those that were started in the House are transferred to the Senate. So that's what crossover week is. When the bill, and it goes through that same process in the second House. The bill goes to committee, RTS opens, we notify and ask people to respond in RTS or call or write their individual legislators. And then as at the hearing, RTS is closed. If it passes to committee, it goes to the bill on the floor. It goes to the committee of the whole. If it's voted, the bill goes to the governor, and the governor acts. He or she in this case, either vetoes the bill or signs the bill. So that's the standard way. We're in the middle of this, and it's crossover, and some of our questions for Elizabeth and Mike are going to be around some of that process. Again, next slide. This legislative session has been very busy, and I know that Elizabeth and Mike are going to comment on that. And so as of mid-February, the Arizona legislature has set a record pace in bill filings for this regular session, with over 1,300 bills already submitted at that time. The Republican lawmakers have reintroduced 87 previously vetoed bills in this session. The resurrected bills are among the record-breaking 2,116 proposals introduced this year. Lawmakers are also bringing back vetoed bills as concurrent resolutions that could be sent to the ballot this year to bypass the governor's approval. So the focus areas for what the bills have been are around immigration, border security, water policy, and resurrecting many of those previous bills. And my personal focus, and the focus of a lot of the advocacy work, is around a number of voting rights, climate, water, criminal justice, education, and I'm forgetting one. But those are the primary ones that we focus on, and there's been a heavy number of those bills as well. So now we'll go on and we'll start. Oh, for those of you who for those of you who use RTS, you know how to use this. This is just a refresher. If you need any information on how to use RTS, that QR code will take you for all the RTS resources and as a refresher. But we really encourage the use of RTS or contacting your legislators directly, either by phone or email. All right, let's start with some of these questions. Mike, Elizabeth, you two can figure out who wants to answer which one of these questions, just to get started. What can the league members do to elevate their and our voice?
Well, I think you just had one really good example of that, and which is the RTS. And signing in to the RTS will put your name on a bill either as in favor or opposed or neutral. And also, I think you can put in comments there when it's going to the committee. So that's always super helpful. I know at least one of our members will actually check the RTS and sometimes reads the comments as part of their vote on the floor. Sometimes if they are especially telling to the situation. So I think that's a really good way to go. I do think emails to members make a big deal as well. And phone calls. There's not like there's not, I guess, an easy way to call all of them, but I think that you could like there would be an easier way to email all of them. But yeah, emails are super helpful. And then coming down to speak, because sometimes we hear a lot of bills that don't really have any testimony at all. And these are things, a lot of them just from inside a Republican member's or a Democratic member's head. So we called, we had a joke about one of them, section of them called Kavanaugh coffee bills, where he just is reading the paper and comes across something and he decides to write a bill on it. And so there might not be anybody that's, lobbying on that particular issue, but it might not be the best issue, or it might be a great issue. And so having folks actually sign in and read those bills as well, I think is super helpful. But do you have anything else to?
No, definitely. And yeah, I think, reaching out to the members any way you can. They do have a voicemail, so their office numbers are all posted on the website on the legislative list, so you can find them there for the Senate or House on azledge.gov. But emails, even if it's something short and if it's personalized, especially the members, especially if they're not even on the elections committee, by the time it gets to caucus or the floor, they'll be like, is this the bill I keep getting all the emails about? Like, they'll notice if they're getting a flux, or if a member shows up to committee not knowing what to expect that day and they're like, why are there so many people in here? That will sort of rate that for them too.
Good. That's good to know. I wasn't sure how the voicemail system worked, so that's good to know. If anybody in the audience has questions, please put them in the Q&A. Would be really helpful. One of our advocacy team members asked, she had worked on a bill, and so she watched the Senate Judiciary election hearing to see, how it flowed and what happened. And so as she was watching it, she said that they referenced documents attachments, but she couldn't figure out how to get to the attachments when you were reviewing the video. Do you have any information about that?
Yeah, it was probably a reference to like an amendment or a fact sheet or something would be my guess. I can't remember that specific example, but if you go to azledge.gov, there's a couple different ways you can do it. The easiest is there's a search bar in the upper right. If you put in any bill number on that, it will take you to the sort of page for that bill, and there's a tab specifically called Documents, and that will have any agenda it goes on, the text of the bill, amendments, and fact sheets.
And so that's where any attachments that were in the committee. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it could be possible too that a member of the public or a lobbyist gives like a packet or a piece of paper to the members of the committee. The chairman can approve that distribution to members of the committee. Sometimes we get a copy of those if it's like just additional information about a bill, or maybe it's background. Which if you ever reached out to one of us, if we had that, we would definitely share it. And sometimes if there's presentations on the agenda too, it'll sometimes link to a presentation, but probably the best thing to do there is to actually just go and watch the committee to get if there is an actual presentation. Because it's not the most transparent system where they put everything possibly online. So yeah.
Okay, good to know. This week one of the days Secretary of State Fontes was speaking, and so of course he mentioned the Voters First Act and that it hasn't had a hearing. My question is, at this stage in the process, will it get a hearing, or does it have to become a striker?
Yeah, so at this point, unfortunately, it's unlikely those will get a hearing. We have, now that we are in crossover week, that is the first week past when any committee can receive a hearing in its original chamber. So House Bill 2907 can't be heard in the House. Senate Bill 1262 can't be heard in the Senate unless they change the rules, which is very unlikely. They could theoretically be introduced as a striker, but those strikers would have to be approved by the chairs of those committees, the same chairs that refused to hear them up to this point. While our members made several requests for them to be heard, I think they knew the entire time it was unlikely, but wanted to make sure that their priorities and Secretary of State's priorities were on paper, especially as a mirror to some of the proposals being introduced and ballot referrals being introduced by Republicans.
Right, right. Yeah, I think I always got the sense that it was kind of known that it was probably not going to get a hearing. So.
Yeah, and especially, like I said, with those ballot referrals, specifically SCR 1001 and HCR 2001, the Collin and Bullock bills, that they made a priority to make sure were the first ballot referrals dropped. Clearly, with Mr. Collin running for Secretary of State's been very vocal that this is a priority for him. So I think the idea was to get something out there to combat that and to say this is a version that expands voter access rather than diminishes it in the name of speeding up election results. Although I would question if that is the true goal of those ballot referrals.
Yeah, well, we have taken a stand on those. We oppose both of those. So, of the more than 100 concurrent resolutions introduced this session, many will change the Constitution, as you know. What are the main factors that determine which ones are likely to actually get through the process to get on the ballot? Because if we had 100 on the ballot, we would have a voter rebellion. I can't imagine a ballot that long. So how do they decide? How do they politically make those calls?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of even the same for bills that are from members, just regular bills. A lot of stuff will get heard in the initial chamber if it has the member really pushing for it through the chair. And sometimes they hear bills knowing that they're, we're going to do it. We're going to put it on the agenda. We'll let what happens next happen next if it gets killed in the House. And I think there's some of that with these concurrent resolutions, right? We'll put them on there because, well, for one, they want to get a reaction out of Democratic members to see how they respond to them. And then they also just, they will, sorry, someone sneezed outside and I lost my train of thought. They'll also, sometimes it's very rare for something like that to die in committee. Usually all of the bills, unless something really weird happens, will get through a committee. So then they will take it to rules. Sometimes in rules, it'll slow down a process. Sometimes the chair will wait. They'll sort of space them out. But normally, if it's heard in a committee, it's going to start moving through the process to get over to the House. And then once it's in the House, it all slows down again. And they do keep tabs on them because they do want to control what actually goes to the voters in November. So we had 3 of them pass out last session. And I think when they did that before, when they had them pass out in the first session of the 2 sessions, they found that sometimes bills changed those same sections of law, and then that caused a little bit of consternation where you have a SCR that's been passed through the process, but now the underlying law has changed. So I think they're waiting more now to see which ones they actually want to go through. And supposedly what they do is at the very end of the process, of the very end of legislative session, the speaker and the president get together and they decide with their staffs what they will actually send through if they think that they have at least 16 votes and 31 votes in the House. They think that's mostly how they do it. So if they've been hearing a lot from folks that folks don't like it, I mean, I think that's the best way to sort of kill these along the way, because sometimes the speaker and the president don't agree on these things. And so if you have one side that you've really been bombarding with all of the bad things that could happen with that SCR, they might actually listen to you and they might not pass it back out of the opposing chamber back to us. So usually if there's any sort of change in the concurrent resolution, it has to come back before it will go to the Secretary of State's office. And there is usually some changes along the way for these things, just especially this session, because there were so many bills introduced and legislative council was trying so hard that a lot of them just have like typos and little things like that that just need to be fixed. So
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that I noticed is sometimes in one of them, I'm thinking of voting processes. They'll change one part of the process, but a different one has another solution for a similar part, so that it's not a conflict, but it's a system. It's not creating a system that flows. It's tweaking it as it goes, but it does sort of contradict itself. It's not helping itself along the way. And I've always thought that there was a point where somebody sat down and said, if you do A in this one and B in this one, you've just washed each other out. I mean, there's a challenge with that.
That is a conversation typically happening behind the scenes. I think the voting referrals that we've seen this year are a perfect example, where there's all of these that would change early voting in this way or ban foreign contributions in this way, and this one has all this reporting and this one's just a straight ban. They recognize that those conflict. The members sometimes just don't coordinate and they all have their own idea for how to do it. So they hear them all, they push it through, and like Elizabeth said, they sort of get up to the end point, and that's where they're like, okay, what is everything in front of us? What are priorities? There's a lot of different things they consider. Unfortunately, us and our members aren't invited to those discussions, so I'm just speculating. But for example, they recognize that sort of voter education or the actual campaign for these is important. So a lot of times they're thinking about which ones can we actually get the money to get the word out, message out about these. In election years, sometimes they're trying to turn out their own voters. So there will be things that they think will really inspire their base to turn out and vote. It was actually really interesting. We were talking about before the call started. This morning, the Arizona Agenda, for anyone who follows that, actually put out a good write-up about this. And they interviewed Senator Kavanaugh, who basically said that he's thinking they'll do a couple more than last year, but certainly less than 20. So I'm not sure what that means. I've heard other members say that they acknowledge that they put out too many last year, and that's why so many of them failed. So I think those are the types of conversations they're having right now.
Yeah, I think we joke because like there's the foreign contribution like language. I think there's been a bill to take care of that on every single Judy agenda that we've had thus far. So it's like they're all different ideas, and depending on which one is written by which member, they're all slightly different.
That one, and I guess there was one of the HCR, and I think you said the number. It's the one of the ones that Colin did, wants to put in the Constitution that only citizens can vote. Well, that's already in the Arizona Constitution. So I'm not sure. I think that appears to be the first item that they want is the voter to see. Well, that's already there. The counter to that is we already do that, but I'm not sure.
And I think that is the thinly veiled sort of strategy that they've gone with on that one is, the first thing is citizens can't vote. That's already the case. Says the voters have to show ID. They say it in a pretty vague way, but that's already the case in Arizona. It says that foreign corporations can't donate to candidates. That's already the case too. And I think they're hoping that someone will just stop reading about 3 or 4 lines down and go, oh, okay, yeah, that's all reasonable, and not get to the, by the way, we're getting rid of the early voting list. That's 5 lines below that.
Yeah, that's the challenge. Okay, now let's talk about strikers, because it's like a mystery on the magic of how this works. So share with everybody what a striker is, how it comes through the process. We saw the first one I saw was a week or so ago with in the Senate, where it was a striker on 1570. So tell us a little bit about how this process works.
Yeah, so a strike everything amendment is what it sounds like. It strikes every single word from the underlying bill and essentially becomes a brand new bill. So those amendments are a little bit different than your other ones. They have to first be noticed on the agenda. So 1570, I think, is a great example for a lot of what we've been discussing so far. So the agenda came out 2 weeks ago. It says a little asterisk and it says, note, there might be a strike everything amendment offered on this. And then they're required to put some sort of short title or general sort of explanation of what it's going to be. And it just said, I think, something along the lines of like polling places, citizenship, something like that. So that sort of flags like, uh-oh, what's that going to be? And then you wait up until 48 hours before the committee starts. And that's when the amendment appears and gets sent out to everyone. So you really only have 2 days to review it, as opposed to the other bills where you get the full 5 days. So those are definitely harder to deal with just because there is less time. So, and you'll see on 1570, I mean, I think people maybe had an idea what it was going to be, maybe that it wasn't going to be as extreme of a measure as it was, but the sort of quick and very loud community response to that, both in the RTS, in their inboxes, in the hearing room itself, I think was potentially a contributing factor to why that bill was held and didn't even get a hearing.
It-
Do you have anything you want to-
It's interesting. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I would just also just mention that, yeah, they can only happen in committee. There are not supposed to be strikers as part of the committee of the whole on the floor. It has been the case sometimes where they kind of do it a little bit where they'll strike most of the bill and put in some new language, or sometimes a member will acknowledge that they're putting in language and maybe it's not germane, but like this has happened before too, where they said, but just trust me, I'll take out the other section when I get to the House so that the other bill that this will be the bill going forward, and it is basically a striker. So that does happen too, but they're not supposed to bring any type of strike everything to the floor.
Yeah. And sometimes it's members have so many bills introduced that a new priority arises for them and they're willing to get rid of one of their other bills. There's also what we call vehicle bills, which are introduced for the sole purpose of being a striker available later on. So one that we always flag is there's always like someone's required to do an annual report and it just says that they have to like send that report, a copy of it to someone.
Or post it online.
Or post it online, even though they already posted online. And that's sort of the type of thing where it's like, okay, this bill doesn't really do anything. So I have a feeling that this is just in case I get an idea later type of bill.
Yeah.
It's great. So the ones that are like that, they've been introduced, they've gone to committee, but nothing happens with them, and then they just sit there and wait to see if they don't advance or they get picked up as a striker. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so it's typically something that seems really mundane. So it just flies through the first chamber. It's passed out relatively unanimous because there's nothing objectionable about it. And then something controversial gets struck on in the other chamber. So
Yeah.
you will see sometimes members ask, is this a vehicle bill? And the sponsor a lot of times will go, no, of course not. This is actually.
I really want to make sure these are put online, these reports. Like,
But it's typically the goal is to get it to the other chamber so that you have something and potentially like the last week to hear bills.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the strategy and timing of using the striker? There has to be a strategy because as I said earlier, they always seem like they're a last minute surprise. So somebody's holding their cards back.
Yeah, I think especially if you have let's just take Senator Fincham, for example. Senator Fincham, this session has, I don't know, maybe like 12 different bills about family law and the family law system. And he's broken some of the bills into different sections where like some of them overlap in certain areas, some of them don't. Some of them are a little, I'm like, is this a vehicle bill? Because like he'll just be basically putting court rule into statute. And so he's trying to, I think, get as many over to the other side so that he also just has options too. So like, obviously the Dems are not voting with him on these family law bills, but he might think that if he gets it over to the House in a friendly committee, that maybe he'll take the other parts of his bills, and like he will combine them into one and strike it onto the one that made it through. So it's always kind of like it's a little safety net for them too. So they might have one idea or one basic idea that's split into different bills moving at the same time, just so that they are trying to get one across the across the courtyard to the House, so that they have that option to maybe strike them all together and put new language on. I think that's one of the strategies that I've been seeing used. The other ones, I just think sometimes the striker is just used because the bill language is obviously a lot of members write bills themselves, or they will use systems to write their bills, and then they find out when they speak to stakeholders after they've introduced them that they make really no sense in the real world, and so they just have to strike all of the language to do something new to that. What other strategies do we see with them?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I don't think there is much of a strategy. It's like, this is the last week to hear bills. I really wanted this idea. It kind of stalled, like Elizabeth said, in the first chamber, so I'm going to try one last time. I think sometimes you get them in response to news events, and maybe the member themselves, even if they don't necessarily think it's going to go anywhere, want to get a 24-hour news story about that striker and their response to something that's happening, trying to get their base excited, especially in an election year. There's a lot of different reasons for them.
So after crossover, they can still introduce, well, it's not introduce a striker. It's because it's already been introduced in another phase, right? I mean, in another way.
They'll have a member from the opposite chamber strike it with their name, but it's still, it would still be the senator's bill once it comes back over. It's still in their name, even if it would have a striker from a different representative. So
once a bill has been striked everything, then it has to go back to the originating house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Both chambers have to vote on the exact same language, no matter what.
Okay, that's good to know. Did you do we know how many HCRs and SCRs have passed to be on the ballot so far? You said 3 from the last session.
Yeah, 3 from last session, nothing yet this year, but I think there's 30 or 40 that are actively moving. I'm not sure how many. I've had a couple elections and gov bills already go over to the House. I don't know what the exact number is right now, but I think about 30 or 40 is where we're at.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think when we talk to our members too, it's like, well, because they're not all terrible bad ideas, but some of them we just say, like, is this worth it to be putting to the ballot right now? Is it worth it right now to have voters decide this? Because we have no idea at this point how many of these things are going to try to bring to the finish line. And so if they have any Democratic votes along the way, they think that there's more support for that. So we always say, like, is this idea worth it? Is it?
Yeah. And I think in that article I referenced, Senator Kavanaugh sort of says, like, I won't name names, but there's a few of them probably aren't going to make it just because they're less important topics. There are some that really are just like, not to say that necessarily this is who he was talking about, but Senator Mesnard, I think, has a lot this year where like he has one, for example, that just moves the first day of session back 2 weeks, or so it's later on in January. And I actually do think he has a relatively rational argument for doing it.
Yeah, we would love that actually.
Yeah, it would be great as a staffer.
Yeah.
Timeline wise, but is that something that is worth, creating a 2-sheet ballot? Is it something that voters even care about or would approve? And is it certainly anything that someone's going to spend money to fundraise and inform voters about? Probably not. So like, I'm not sure if that's going to make the cut.
Yeah. It's tough. Well, I know you know that we send out a lot of testimony because I copy you on everyone we send. So, but we're wondering, we had a conversation on lobby day with 2 of the staffers from the governor's office, policy staffers from the governor's office, and it made me start to think, would it be helpful if we sent our written testimony to the minority heads of the House and the Senate when they're being heard in committee? Would that help with to get a broader audience for our arguments?
I don't think it would hurt. I mean, what we do, just as a little inside, we do these things called our hot sheets. So we take the bills that we think are maybe going to have the most testimony or maybe be the most controversial, and we pull those aside on a list and we share those with members at the beginning of the week, or with leadership at the beginning of the week. So I do think if there was a bill that you guys opposed, like it would be reinforcing the fact that it is a controversial bill, and they would probably be like, oh, I think I heard about that in our hot sheet meeting where we talked about it. But in those meetings, there's sometimes when there's 57 bills on a Judiciary and Elections Committee, we're spending maybe 30 seconds each on each bill. So yeah, to get that additional background, I think for the leaders could be helpful.
Yeah, but I think, and I know you already do this, but I think the most impactful for those bills is definitely the members of the committee.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who are debating, and I take the league's weekly comments and I give those straight to my members to prepare them for all the bills in committee. And they're the ones who, when it gets to caucus or when it gets to the floor, they're who all the other members look to for guidance. So
Yeah.
they'll look at the
Okay.
elections committee members and go, okay, what does this bill do? What do you think about it? What have you heard about it?
Right. Right.
Yeah, and
Good.
Mike and I, we provide a lot of talking points for our members on the floor, because I think the bills that we deal with, I mean, elections obviously fundamental right for us, and then a lot of the bills that go through judiciary are crime related, and so anything where you're possibly putting someone in jail for a period of time, we like to have our members talk about those things. So yeah, I think we provide a lot of talking points, and
Yeah.
our members do a lot of the talking on the floor. So we love that.
Well, and I know on Wednesday when we were there, the education and vouchers had a lot of discussion. And so I know that for our members, the education piece is really, really powerful. And Tina's the head of that committee, and she's on the call. And if there's anything that we can do to help elevate our position that we're supporting on those, we would be more than happy to do that as well. Because I think we know that there's going to be an attempt to have a initiative on the ballot around the vouchers, and wouldn't be a bit surprised if there was a countermeasure through an SCR and HCR.
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
A referral on the ballot too. So, in fact, I know there was something that was trying to put the vouchers into the Constitution. I don't know if that's where that will stand. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that's been an ongoing part of the Prop 123 conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Yeah, I bet.
So we have a question from one of our members on the call. So would you repeat the part about the bill having to have the same language for both chambers to pass? If a striker-like bill passes to the other chamber and gets changed for it, does that bill with the new language go back to the other chamber? That doesn't seem to be in the flow chart.
Yeah, exactly. So both the chambers have to vote in the exact same language that the governor then eventually signs on to. So if it's amended in any way, even if it's adding a comma or something minor like that, it has to return to the original chamber. And sort of the process is 99% of the time, I would say, the amendments are agreed upon already. The sponsor of the bill says, yeah, that's okay, or asks, can you in the House amend the Senate bill for me? But there are the occasional times where it'll come back here and maybe the sponsor doesn't agree with what the House did on the bill. And this is kind of weedsy, but then it will go to what's called a conference committee, and they sort of negotiate between the chambers to figure out what is going to be the agreed on language that we both vote on, because at the end of the day, it always has to be the same.
Yeah, and I
Thank
think
you.
where it could be an issue for folks is like if it's a striker in the House on a bill and it's a new topic and it wasn't heard over here, there was no opportunity for public comment over here. I think that's when we'll try to slow down the process a little bit and really try to get our members and the public to understand what is in that new striker, because it never had an opportunity to be heard on in a committee here, where there would be like a little bit more of an opportunity to see what's in it and maybe poke at it a little bit, especially if if it's got some language that we might not agree with. So that's definitely one thing that happens is often if it is a full strike or want a brand new topic in the House, and vice versa as they change back and forth, it will not have had a hearing in the opposite chamber. So that's sometimes the conference committees are used for that. But sometimes they'll negotiate the changes and then go back to the floor and change it back or change it on the floor and then send it back over. So they're trying to be more fluid with it, and I think trying to avoid more conference committees as we go. So
Thank you.
Awesome. And then we have another question. Request to speak.
oh yeah,
I think you
paused.
cut out for just a second
for
there.
a second. We didn't hear it.
Sorry.
That's
Okay, so how much personal information can legislators see about people who use request to speak?
So I think we've had a conversation about this, me and some of the folks at the league. I know that you have to put your name down, and I think you put down your email when you sign up, but when you're filling out the RTS that's online, it's just the name that's visible.
Yeah,
I don't think that there's a mechanism
they can see
on the
beyond
website where you can see anything additionally.
Yeah, I mean, if you're signing in, like if you were representing someone, it would
Yeah.
also show that. But I think it just basically shows your name if you're representing someone, and then if you do put in comments, it'll show the comments. But I don't think they can see much beyond that.
That was the outcome, I think, the last time you and I chatted about this, Mike. Yeah, it doesn't, for one thing, you don't even have to declare. I don't remember what other information you even put in when you sign up, other than your name, and I don't remember.
Yeah, I've certainly never seen anything else,
Yeah.
when I pulled up the RTS.
So there's a follow-up to that question, and it's, so the legislators see the same information the public sees.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, unless
Okay.
you reach out to them obviously directly through like an email, the RTS is the same for them. So they're pulling up BSI or Easy Ledge just like anyone who's watching at home.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Other questions? Comments? Things that we need to know the deep dark secrets of from the state capitol.
I don't even know if we can get into all those things, but yeah, I mean, I think for people that are interested, just like signing up for some of the daily sort of newsletters that go out, the Arizona Agenda, Axios, I've got that. I do the Arizona Mirror, I do the Capital Times. So I get at least all of those every morning so that I can at least scan through kind of what's happening that day or what's the sort of new gossip on the street. So those things I find really helpful, just to kind of help a person know what is going on here on a daily basis, because it seems like it changes from day to day, and there's always going to be a brand new crisis every session that comes up. And so kind of following that, I think is super helpful. But yeah, like I know people really like the Arizona Agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know it, especially from the outside, I'm sure it's incredibly confusing and unclear and almost seems like it's intentionally set up that way, or maybe you're just can't quite figure out it. The schedule is always sort of a mess. That's just the way it works. There's so many times where even us on the floor, like, what are we doing? What's happening?
Yeah. Yeah, checking the AZ LEG and looking at the calendars that are getting posted. I mean, that's people ask us, oh, do you have an advanced copy of like what's going on the committee of the whole for tomorrow? We're like, no, they give it I mean, this week they've literally been giving them to us at like 5 or 4 o'clock, and then they give us an hour to do amendments. And so I think on Friday, or was it Friday, or was it Wednesday? I don't, this week has been crazy, but like they gave us literally the cow calendars at like 5 o'clock, and then they said, amendments are due by 8 o'clock the next morning. And if you don't have the amendment ready to go at that point, it's not easy to call Ledge Council and say, hey, can you do an amendment for me after 5 o'clock? And can we get this distributed by 8 o'clock tomorrow? I mean, it's
difficult.
Intentionally hard.
It's difficult getting something done on a weekend when no one's in the building.
Yeah.
And I don't have access to those softwares.
Yeah, and it's purposeful.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's been a lot this week. Very, very short turnarounds.
Yeah, we heard one session went till 5 o'clock in the morning, so.
Yes,
That-
the House did, yeah.
Another one of those schedules that we're like, wait, why? Why'd they do
Yeah.
that? What was that for?
Apparently they lost some members on yesterday that they wanted to shove through a bunch of bills, which that just means they're coming our way, so that scares me. But
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this all flows.
Yeah.
And do you have a pool that says when the budget's gonna get done and when they're gonna adjourn?
there is a Sine Die pool. I don't think it's started yet.
No, I haven't seen it. Yeah, there's always one I think the House puts on for staffers of the two chambers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a sign but that has coincided with the budget most of the time the last couple of years.
Yeah. We're thinking that we might get out a little bit early this year, just because it is a campaign year and folks don't like to stick around as long when it's the campaign season. So we're hoping for May. I'm hoping for May. But we'll see.
Recent history says otherwise, so
Yeah.
we'll see which of those two motivations wins out.
We also had the Department of Corrections was put in, like the healthcare portion was put into receivership, which I also could think that members might want to just get the budget done as quickly as possible because dealing with that will be part of it. So I'm hoping for an early budget this year.
Well, good. I hope you're right.
We'll make the 100-day timeline that we're supposed to make.
The last couple of times that there's been an election, they say, oh, well, they'll adjourn early so that they can go campaign. Well, that wouldn't happen last time. So
Yeah.
we'll
Sometimes
see.
it doesn't.
Yeah, and what we've seen, I think, more recently is they'll take 2-week recesses or a week recess, and that way they can, be half the time here and half the time campaigning.
Yeah. One of the questions that just came in says, can you explain the difference between cow and floor vote?
Yeah, so first step is the committee, which is, just the members, 7 or so members typically. Then it goes to the Rules Committee caucus, and then it goes to the floor. The first step of floor is the committee of the whole, and that's the entire Senate and the entire House. So every member, and that's where they can debate, ask questions, and amend the bill. Once that step is over, it goes to the third read or the vote. And at that point, they can't engage with each other. They can explain their vote, but they can't ask questions. They can't amend the bill anymore. So those are sort of the two main functions of the floor.
Yeah. They do have this thing now that's called Ad Cow, and they actually put one out today. I think it's their first Ad Cow of the year, which just means an additional cow. So if you notice that online, it means that basically, so the bill that's on it today is 1566. It's about malicious
Delays for housing.
delays for development. And so it passed out of the committee of the whole, I think yesterday or the day before, and now they've decided that they want to amend it again, so they're pulling it back into cow. So you can, as long as, and they have even pulled them back after a third read where they've sent them over to the other chamber. They will sometimes pull a bill back if there's permission to do so and change it again. So those are relatively new processes that we are doing here in the Senate. They used to just rely more on conference committees, but like I said, they're really getting away from doing conference committees and kind of fixing bills that way, which also just leaves the public out of that process, because at least with a committee or a conference committee, it is public.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Amra, more?
I think that seems to be it.
Other questions? All right, let's go to the next slide and see where we are.
Okay. So this is a slide highlighting our new podcast, which is called Social Contract in Action, Democracy, Dialogue, and Civic Duty. You can scan the QR code to listen to your preferred podcasting platform. We have about 8 episodes out already, and this is done through college student perspective. So myself and about 4 other of my colleagues. And this is in light of the obviously 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And so we wanted to sort of explore how that document and the social contract with our government and other citizens comes to fruition today, and what that means in our context with the political climate today. And so some of the topics that we cover are, for example, government overreach and authoritarian tendencies in democracy that we are seeing recently, judicial overreach and interference, foreign affairs, and the affordability crisis. So just things that are relevant to young people, but also most of us today. And so I highly encourage everyone to, explore, listen, share with your networks. The hope is to sort of expand this podcast to other of our founding documents as well, such as the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. But yes, we went through the 27 grievances and sort of split them up into about 7-8 episodes. And it was a pleasure to be on. So, yeah.
This group's done a great job.
Thanks, Cindy.
Okay, and reminding you, tomorrow is our last in the series, and this is on One Person, One Vote, looking at the Electoral College, and it's from 2 to 4, I believe, tomorrow. If you haven't signed up, the registration QR code is there. Elizabeth, Mike, any closing comments for us? We're going to end a little bit early and give people some time back.
No, I think just thank you for having us back again. This is our 4th year in a row.
So yeah.
So
Good.
yeah, we're going to be really good at it. So yeah, no, we thank you. We thank you for your involvement. It's hard for people to dedicate the time to their civic duty and their government. And I think it's great that you are an organization that brings people together to do so and to do so for the fundamentals that we all hold so dear. So thank you.
Yeah, just want to thank you all and really stress again, how important your opinion is to my members. There's so many bills, there's so much information moving. If I tell them or they see on RTS that the League of Women Voters is opposed to something, they take note of that, and that means a lot to them, and they want to know why. And that is an important part of them making up their mind on certain bills. So I really appreciate everything you all do, and hope you know that we do pass along your thoughts to our members, and they care a lot about it.
And we occasionally hear from them, and it's great to know that the information is getting shared. We really appreciate it too. One closing last question. You mentioned the bill on the malicious intent. Do you have the bill number? Somebody's curious.
1566.
Super. Thank you.
Yes.
Of course.
Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody in the audience. Have a wonderful afternoon. It's a beautiful day outside.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.